Perfect. So we'll go ahead and start the recording here. We really would love for this to be an interactive session. So throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop it into the chat. We will make sure your questions get addressed, and we want to make the most of everyone's time here. So if you have any questions, don't be shy. I will pause periodically in between the presentation to just see where we are with questions, and we'll let people chime in and address those questions. And yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and dive right in. So let's
Perfect.
first start with a quick introduction. I'm happy to present Christine Naidoo with RCN. She is a senior loan officer with us today, and she is known for helping new investors as well as experienced investors with practical strategies on how to fund their deals, right? And
Yeah, thanks, Connie.
yeah, so with that, I'll hand over the mic to Christine.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today and have the opportunity to chat with all of you. I hope that you find a lot of value in today's presentation and it gives you some things to think about and really starting to transition from fix and flip into the possibility of ground up construction. So jumping into things here, let's see. Okay, great. So I have been with RCN for about 4.5 years now. RCN as a company is about 15 years old. So we started with our fix and flip product as our kind of our flagship product, and then we transitioned a bit into offering 30-year DSCR loans, and then ultimately ground up construction loans. So that product is, we've had it for a couple of years now, a few years now, but as a team of loan officers, we have had to learn this product and this opportunity along with a lot of our fix and flip investors. So we are definitely anxious to teach you more about this and help you make the transition as well. Because I know for us as loan officers, when we first got this product, we were like, this is overwhelming. I don't want to do it. So I can only imagine how hard it is as an investor when it's, your money on the line, how, scary it can be to transition to something new. So, I hope that I'm able to break it down for you a little bit and make it a little bit less scary. So today we'll talk about shifting your mindset, why now is a great opportunity, helping you find some of those opportunities and what to do once you find them, and some action steps that you can walk away with today. All right. So first of all, I wanted to talk about shifting your mindset because we're not going to get anything done with the wrong mindset. Uh, the common misconception here is that ground up construction is complicated and it's only for seasoned developers, and that couldn't be, farther from the truth. We offer this product as an opportunity for investors that have never done a ground up construction project before. So if you don't have any experience with ground up construction, you can still use this product. Of course, if you have experience with flipping properties, that's helpful. But if you're new to this altogether, you can still start with ground up construction. It might actually be easier because there's less surprises. So, the reality here is that the more prepared you are, that's going to matter a lot more than the experience that you're bringing to the table for something like this. We want to see that an investor is organized and knows has done their research to figure out what their next steps are. You don't have to have it all figured out, but we want to know that you can figure it out and that you're willing to figure it out. So, one of the things that we can do here is just acknowledge that fear. You don't, you might be saying to yourself, I don't know how to build from scratch. And that's why you have a team. You're building that team. If you don't already have them, you're finding your general contractor, your subs, your realtor, whoever you're working with as part of your team, including your different lender options, so that anything that you don't know, you can rely on your team for that. What if I mess up? We ask ourselves that all the time. What if I don't know what I'm doing? Well, what if you do mess up? You've probably messed up before and you've figured it out, and this is no different. I mean, of course, it's a larger scale project, but if you just break down those problems or, those fears into smaller bite-sized pieces, you'll be able to figure it out just like you have on any of your flip projects. I'm sure that you've run into things that you maybe thought to yourself, I probably could have planned better for that. Well, there's always going to be something that we could have planned better for, but we learn from it and you figure it out. there's not many things that aren't figure outerable. So, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to think like a builder and not just a buyer. So, a lot of times, fix and flip investors are reacting to deals, whereas builders are creating those deals. So, um, you know, don't just see the value in those properties. You're creating that value in the properties. You're used to solving those problems, but with ground up construction, you're really designing those solutions. So you might find that you like it a little bit better than flipping properties. There's a lot less surprises there. And you're able to really embrace the power of that control. So with flipping properties, you're dealing with a lot. You may have bad plumbing, hidden mold, different things that are coming up in your budget. Whereas with new construction, you have a lot more control over what that layout and the finishes and the whole process looks like. So with those more predictable timelines, as long as you have a good team and fewer unknowns, you're able to make that mindset shift from, ground up construction isn't necessarily riskier, it's more controllable. Chances are you
And
already have. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Connie.
sorry, I was going to say, can I pause here real quick
Sure.
because I really love this slide and what you just said. So I'm not a flipper.
Thank you.
I burr all my properties, but they
Hmm.
are massive rehab projects.
Yep.
And I'm a little bit earlier on in my real estate investing journey. So
Hmm.
the thought of ground up construction and new development quite honestly terrifies me. And I'm sure a lot of other people as well,
Right.
right? For those of us those in the that are attending this call, please put a one in the chat if you at some point felt the same or you currently feel the same, right? But I love that you said that we have more control of it. And
Hmm.
I do agree with that because when I do a full gut rehab project versus just a partial, I know exactly, the bones
Right.
that are going in and things like that. So,
Right.
yeah. Again, for those who are just joining us, we want this to be a very interactive session. So please put a one in the chat if, what we just discussed really resonates with you either now or some point in your real estate investing journey. And thanks so much, Christine.
Yeah, of course. I mean, chances are that as investors, you already have a lot of those transferable skills. You're used to evaluating comps, you're used to managing contractors and budgets and timelines and navigating permits and inspections and all of those things. So you're not starting from scratch, you're just building off of the skills that you already have. Right. So, sorry, I think there's a little bit of a delay from when I click to the next slide and when it goes. Okay. So why is now a great opportunity to start with ground up construction? Obviously, we can all see that the market conditions are, there's lower inventory, there's a lot of competition for that inventory, and that this window is not going to stay open forever. So at some point, hopefully, interest rates will stabilize a little bit and demand will continue for these opportunities, but the competition for these buildable lots or, tear downs, what have you, is going to start to look a lot like what we're seeing right now for properties that you want to flip. Um, so right now we're seeing a lot of municipalities that are streamlining the permitting process to encourage new housing opportunities. And we're seeing, a lot of benefits for the people that are first in the market and being able to take advantage of that pricing. The opportunity here lies in the fact that with ground up construction, there's often higher margins because you've got fewer surprises, like we've already talked about. You know exactly what you're getting. You have a solid plan going in. You're not tearing out a wall and finding that everything behind it is covered in mold. Buyers as well are seeing, they're increasingly preferring that new construction because it may be energy efficient, it's a more modern layout, it's fewer maintenance issues. Um, it's just a really great time to get involved with ground up construction. We have a lot of millennials and Gen Z entering a housing market. And let's be honest, a lot of our expectations have been shaped by HGTV and these Instagram worthy, houses, and new builds can deliver on that. And we're seeing these sell a lot faster and at a premium price compared to an older home that's been renovated. As far as financing opportunities come, we're seeing a lot faster approvals. I know our process has tightened up quite a bit. when we first introduced this product, there was a little bit of an adjustment period, but now we're seeing him move a lot faster, especially if you're submitting a really strong loan package. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in later slides. But, we're able to move through this product a lot faster and, guide you through the product a lot faster so that, you know exactly what to expect. It's a really clear draw process and you don't have to have that ground up construction experience. So just being able to get the financing that you need to start the project is a really great opportunity. Another great option for ground up construction is the predictability of the profit. So you have your controlled budget, you have a relatively predictable timeline, and you have those higher resale values. So you can, spec out those deals a little bit better and plan for what your portfolio is going to look like. And ground up construction, and as women in this space, we have a really strong competitive advantage. So oftentimes we're bringing, project management, collaboration, attention to detail, all of these skills that we've used to get to where we are in this industry. Those are all key strengths in ground up construction and when you're working on these new builds. So while the industry is evolving, a lot of lenders and a lot of there's a lot of people in this space that are actively looking to support diverse builders. So, now is a great time to claim that space and really get your foot in the door so that you have this opportunity before it starts to look like what we're seeing right now for flips. Okay, let's see. So how do you find these opportunities? What makes a deal financeable? What do lenders want to see? A lot of times we're already seeing that permits are approved and the zoning is approved. That's pretty much the first step because that's going to take the longest in the process. So if you don't have permits or the zoning needs to be changed, you'd probably want to sort that out before you bring it to a lender. But that's where we're seeing a lot of investors bring the project to us. So they're ready to build, land has already been cleared, or that's part of their construction budget is they're going to be tearing down a property. And just really being ready to present the package is a great time to incorporate your lender into the project. The next thing that's really important in making a project financeable is having an accurate ARV or after construction value. So a lot of times, a house down the street may have sold for 700,000, or you saw a property, in the same town that sold for 700,000, but on this street that you're looking to tear down a house, maybe it doesn't have the same comps as that property. So we need to really make sure that the after construction value that you're looking at is accurate based on what an appraiser is going to be looking at. So typically they're going to be looking at deals that sold in the last 6 months that are preferably under a mile. We like to see at least under 3 miles. Hopefully they won't have to go farther out than that to find some accurate comps. So if you're, comparing comps on MLS or on Zillow or wherever you're looking at those comps, narrow it down a bit so that you can really make sure that the after construction value that you're banking on and that you're presenting as, part of this plan for your project is supported by recent data and not just on a gut feeling, because we may feel like a deal is a really good deal and it makes a lot of sense to do a new build in a specific area or specific neighborhood, but do the comps support that? Is it going to pencil out on an appraisal? And then, something else that we want to see is that you have a really clear exit plan or exit options. So chances are a lot of ground up construction projects, we're going to see that the exit plan is to sell, but some of them are to rent. If it's a smaller scale, more modest build, it may be to rent, or maybe you're building like a 4 unit or something like that, and you're planning to rent it. We want to make sure that there's market rents that support what you're building and you're not, building something that has rents that are too high for that area, and just that the whole exit plan to get out of the bridge loan makes sense. Are you going to refinance it? How long is the build going to take? What does your draw plan look like as far as, drawing on your budget? If you have cash to do most of the build, or are you going to be drawing every month, every couple of weeks? What does it look like for your contractors? So just making sure that you have a clear strategy for how you're going to get out of that bridge loan and into permanent financing or sell the property, that is very helpful too. Some things that we
Awesome.
see. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks
Any
so much, Christine.
questions?
Yeah, I did want to pause here real quick to
Sure.
just kind of pull in the room. Does anybody have any questions? Is this information landing? If you can type one insight or question in the chat, that would be great. And we want to make sure that, we address everybody's questions. I personally have a question in regards to
Sure.
ARV. ARV is really tricky. And you
Hmm.
mentioned that, we want to make sure that the ARV is the appraised value, right? What the
Right.
appraiser looks at.
Right.
And oftentimes, you know, I don't know, like it's really challenging actually.
It can be.
Specifically, yeah, specifically for new constructions, like what tips do you have for us
Sure.
in
I mean,
pulling
I think like
ARV?
you said, it can be really hard to you can have a gut feeling that it's going to sell for a certain amount and it very well might sell for that amount. There's plenty of times that we see the after repair value on an appraisal is way lower than what our borrower ends up getting on their second appraisal when they're doing, a DSCR loan and cashing out on the bridge loan. So, the market could have shifted over that 6 months that it took for them to rehab it or build. But the most important thing is that you're using the data that the appraiser is going to use because ultimately that's what we have to go on. We can't lend off of a gut feeling. So just making sure that you're not overbuilding for the area because it may be a great build and you think that you can rent it for a certain amount. But a lot of times when the appraisals come in, it's a little bit of a reality check on like, no, we think it's not going to be worth, 500,000. We think it'll be worth 400,000. And if the deal still works with those numbers, then that's fine, but it may affect your margins. So just making sure that you understand not just how you would look at it, because a buyer may say like, okay, the whole of South Windsor, that's where our CN is located. So the whole of South Windsor, maybe a house sold on the other side of town and you think that this side of town you can build it to a certain, call it $600,000 build. But an appraiser may be looking at it differently if it's a different school district, if there's, different barriers, like maybe, you know, uh, maybe there's like a main road that divides the town in half, and they're saying, well, this is on one side of Route 5, this is on the other side of Route 5. Those types of little nuances are really what the appraiser is going to be using to justify their values. So I would encourage you to really, fine tune how you're defining your ARVs, not just on ground up construction, but on flips as well, so that you can really make sure that your margins are where you expect them to be.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. I'm
Of
going to go ahead
course.
and pause here. Was there any questions from the attendees and, even any comments in regards to the information that we've gone over so far that's really landing with you?
Yeah, definitely. If you have any questions on like how to get started or, things that you're concerned about or why you haven't gotten started, feel free to pop those in the chat. I would love to talk some of those through. Talking about the ARV, that's definitely one of the red flags that we see is, investors that are overvaluing that after construction value, and it could affect, what we're able to lend on because the biggest difference between, fix and flip and ground up construction is with fix and flip, we're lending on value. So you're looking at, LTVs. With ground up construction, we're lending on cost. So we're looking at LTC instead of LTV. So we're able to finance, call it up to 75% of your total build cost versus, 75% of the total value of the property. There's nothing to value yet, so we have to value it based on those costs. So really making sure that the budget is tight and you have enough on your budget ensures that your margins are going to make sense.
Love that. Thanks so much for sharing. That's
Yeah,
super
of
helpful.
course. Yeah. Another thing that we see investors run into sometimes is just timelines, especially with, permitting or working with the town or working with, newer, um, maybe it's new members to your team. Maybe you haven't worked with an architect before, and for ground up construction, you need those plans. And maybe their timing is maybe it takes them 3 weeks to get those plans back to you, and that can really slow down your deal when you're used to moving, within a week or two for fix and flip deals and you're submitting the budget and you're just ready to go. But with ground up construction, you need those finalized plans, not just for us as a lender, but also to submit for, to the town and for your contractors and your team. So just making sure that you understand what all of those little pieces of your timeline look like so that you are not losing time or you can, better budget for that time. Something else that we see that can kind of put a damper on some enthusiasm sometimes for some investors is a really vague loan package. So, I it's happened at least once, maybe a couple times where, I'll get a call and okay, I've got this address. I want to do ground up construction. I'm like, okay, great. Well, what are you anticipating for a budget? And they're like, like 150. Okay. So that's where we're starting. And that's fine to have those conversations, but don't expect to be submitting an application and ordering an appraisal the next day. We really need to get narrow down what that package looks like, and maybe put a little bit more work into what the specs are so that we can actually move forward with everything and have an accurate ARV and really know what the budget looks like, so that we're not wasting time on you're submitting a budget for 100,000, and then that's very low for a new build, but you're submitting a budget for 100,000, and then we're submitting that budget to an external vendor for review, and they're saying, nope, we actually need, we recommend 150 or 200,000 on this budget. So now we're going back and forth. We're adjusting the budget. We have to get the appraisal adjusted. It just makes everything take a little bit longer instead of taking a little bit of extra time on the front end to really fine tune your loan package and get your details together so that we can move forward with the appraisal and keep everything moving in the right direction.
We do have a question in the chat from Melissa here. It says,
Sure.
how long is your prices from start to finish?
How long is your prices from start to? I'm not sure what you mean by that. How long? Like,
Maybe the question is your loan term duration?
oh,
Like,
process. How long is your process from start?
okay, that
Sure.
makes sense.
Sure. So for ground up construction, I would say to plan at least 3 to 5 weeks. And the biggest piece of that is going to be like just getting all of the documents together from you as the borrower. So, the appraisals come back fairly quickly. They're very similar to a fix and flip appraisal where they're giving us an as-is value of the land and they're giving us an after construction value in that appraisal. So it's still a two value appraisal. And then we have some external reports that we order in tandem with that. So we have the budget reviewed and then we also have the appraisal reviewed when that comes in. Those are pretty quick. We're seeing that the biggest kind of time suck is just getting together all of the things that we need. So, if you have the stamped permits already, or, you're showing that you've already submitted the plans to the town and those are stamped, the plans from the architect is usually what takes the longest for people to get us if the plans aren't done or if they were still finalizing the plans or, what have you. For some reason, that seems to be the biggest holdup that makes our process take the longest. But once we get that appraisal back and we have, your entity documents, your photo ID, your bank statement, all of the basics that you would expect with any loan, we're usually able to move it pretty quickly after that.
Awesome, thank you.
Of
So
course.
what would you say is like average time frame
I
from
would say the
beginning to
average
end?
is about 4 weeks. If
Okay,
it's a repeat borrower and it's not their first project, we can probably tighten that up to 3 weeks or less. But
got it.
if it's your first deal, if it's your first time working with us as a lender or with any lender, it's probably going to take closer to 4 to 5 weeks for everything to be closed up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying. We
Of
have another
course.
question here from Judy. Construction loans cover what percent of the total anticipated build cost? And how do most investors cover the difference? That's a great question, actually.
Sure. So I would say of course, each lender is going to be different. So make sure that you know what your different lenders can offer because, of course, every lender has different options. So having multiple lenders is always helpful so that you can figure out what the best option is. For us, we're covering up to 75% of the as-is value for the actual initial advance. And then our goal is to cover 100% of those construction build costs. But if it's a really low value acquisition and the budget, for ground up construction can be quite high, we're wanting to make sure that the investor has enough skin in the game. So you may have to pay into that construction budget before we're funding it. So let's say the construction budget is 200,000, but the price of the land was only 15,000. So before we're starting to lend out that money for the 200,000 build cost, at closing, you may have to pay into some of that, maybe a 10 to 15,000 into that 200,000 budget so that when you are drawing on that construction budget, the first 15,000 that you get out is going to be the 15,000 that you put in. So now you don't just have the 15,000 for what you bought the property at, you also have the 15,000 for what you put into the construction costs. So you're a little bit more invested in this project. We really want to make sure that, we're not just, it's just a small purchase price and it's something that you're willing to walk away from because maybe the project isn't what you expected. We want to work with you to make sure that the project is successful, and make sure that you're not over leveraging yourself, especially if you're going to be holding the property or also selling the property. We want to make sure that you have strong enough margins that it's worth it to you and it makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And so the second question on how do most investors come up with the difference? I have some creative ways that I've seen, but I would love to hear from you on what you're
Sure.
seeing from your clients.
Sure. I mean, specific to lending, I mean, we don't allow any second liens behind our liens, so I wouldn't recommend, getting,
Right.
opting
Another
for
loan.
something,
Yeah.
letting another
Hmm.
loan be your strategy there. But of course, I'm sure, for some of your projects, you may have private investors that are working with you for some of those costs. And if you're I would say probably just making sure that you have enough reserves to get the construction started so that you can take the draws out is the best way to work it because you don't want to be using borrowed funds to pay our loan. That wouldn't make a lot of sense for us as a lender to look at. We want to make sure that you have enough in reserve. So, if you have another property that you're going to cash out on first, or you're just needing to save a little bit more, we see some investors using like a HELOC or something that they need to pull some
Hmm.
temporary funds from. But that's, our preference is that you're just making sure that you have enough to get the build started so that you can rely on the draws.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, of course. I would say as far as the last point I have here on this slide, just knowing what your lender offers and what their box looks like so that you can go into these deals and make a plan with, knowing what leverages your lenders are able to offer you is really helpful. So just understanding what their costs are, what the closing costs are, what upfront costs there are, and what leverages they're able to offer on different projects. Ground up construction is going to be pretty straightforward, whereas like a fix and flip loan, if it's a light rehab, if it's a moderate rehab, if it's a heavy rehab, you may be seeing different leverages from your lenders on those projects. But with ground up construction, it should be pretty straightforward. So just understanding what your lenders offer for that so that you can build your deal sheet and figure out what your margins are each time. Okay. So now that you're in your right mindset, you have, identified some opportunities and you're ready to look at funding your build. What do lenders want to see as part of your loan package? So there's a couple of, personal documents that you can get together for any financing that you're looking for, whether it's ground up construction or 30-year fix and flip. And I'm sure that most of you already have those on hand. You have your basic documents, your entity documents, you're making sure that your entity is active, your bank statements, your photo ID, all of the really generic ones. But then you also want to have those project specific documents. So if you have any plans yet, if you just the address is helpful. We can work with you to figure out some comps, but knowing what the address is, especially with ground up construction, sometimes it's just a lot and that address can be hard to find and it can be hard for us to find. So maybe a nearby address if it's not registered yet so that we can figure out what the comps look like in that area. Um, Other things that are helpful, you're having your personal financial statement is going to come up often with ground up construction. And then for the property itself, what that construction budget looks like, your soft cost, your hard cost, if you've done any construction to date. So, for ground up construction, our seasoning period is 24 months. So if you bought the property last year and maybe you were waiting to build on it, but you cleared the land, just having a record of how much money you've already put into the property, because that's going to factor into your total loan to cost. So, whatever you bought the property for, and then how much work you've already put into it, and then how much construction is left to do. and your after construction value, based on those comps like we already talked about, and what your exit plan is. Having realistic expectations for what the timeline looks like. It's not going to close as quickly as a fix and flip loan. It's going to be, a pretty similar process, but it is going to just take a little bit longer because there are a couple of extra reports that we need to gather. And then, having that clear plan personally as far as how long the project is going to take. So we offer different loan terms, 12, 18, or 24 months. And if you're planning for the project to take 6 months, maybe that's realistic if you've done it before, but it's probably not the most realistic. If you think you're going, if it's your first build, you're probably going to need an 18-month term, just so you have enough time, not only for the build itself, but also for either getting it staged and sold or getting it rented out. Sometimes finding a tenant can take a little bit longer than you would like it to. So making sure that you have enough time to really, you know, sort out what that final exit plan is, especially if, look at how long the properties in your market have been on the market, especially new builds. Do they usually stay on the market for a week? Do they stay on the market for 30 days? Hopefully it's a shorter time period, but making sure that you're not waiting until the last month of your loan to get that property on the market, and just ensuring that you have enough time to get out of the loan, or maybe explore any, extension options before you need to. Some questions that you can ask your lender. What pricing options can I expect? Most of them are going to be project specific. So I can give you general terms. We offer up to 75% of the as-is value, up to 75% of the after construction value. But sometimes, if you have a larger budget or a smaller budget, the loan terms are going to be affected by that specific deal. So, you can get a sense of what that pricing looks like, but, feel free to reach out with any project specific questions that you have so I can help you figure out what that pricing looks like in real time. Preparing, just making sure that you know what your credit looks like. A lot of times when we see investors working on these fix and flip projects, you're using your credit to fund these flips, and then you're not really worried about it because you're cashing out after you complete the project and your credit score goes back up. But sometimes those fluctuations in credit can really impact what you're wanting to see for lending opportunities. So just making sure you know what that looks like, so that you're not surprised when we're pulling credit and it's way lower than you expected. We want you to have the best options possible. Gathering all those project documents and building that loan package so that you're not wasting any time when the opportunity does come across your desk, because, as we've talked about before, there is, a decent amount of competition, but we don't want you to miss out on any deals because you're working on these things that you could have worked on before the deal is available.
I have a quick
Any,
question.
sure.
Yeah. So, as far as track record goes, right? Let's say
Hmm.
I have not done a ground up to construction,
Hmm.
but I do have flip experience, right? Is that
Hmm.
taken into account?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then what about for someone who maybe doesn't have any experience at all? How do you
Sure.
guys, what do you recommend there?
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to work with investors that don't have any experience yet. Our best suggestion there is to just really make sure that you have a solid team. And so, I mean, we're going to want to make sure that they have a general contractor that's, available for the project, and see what that construction contract looks like to make sure that it's locked in as part of our underwriting process. But we can certainly work with investors where this is their first time with ground up construction, or maybe they've only done one flip before. So we'll certainly take that into account for pricing. Of course, the more experience you have, the better that pricing is going to be as you move through projects. You'll garner that experience and be able to get better terms as you go. Um, but yes, just being as organized as possible if this is your first ground up construction opportunity, and being able to show that, like, yes, I'm ready to take on this project. I've done my homework. Here's the margins that I expect. Here's what I expect for after construction value. And we'll work with you to kind of not fact check it, but, make sure that we're seeing the same things that you're seeing. Talk that through, make sure we're on the same page so that there's no surprises on the appraisal. Hopefully, we're pretty close on the values that we're expecting. But the biggest thing, if you're a newer investor, especially for ground up construction, is just making sure that you're organized, and not necessarily that you know what you're doing, because we can fake it till we make it a little bit, but just that you have a good sense of what you need to do. it's okay if you haven't done it before, but you know what the order of things is.
Got it. That's actually super helpful.
Yeah,
So we have about 5 minutes left. Wanted to check back in with the audience. Any questions from anyone? Okay, Christine, you
perfect.
can go
So
ahead and power through.
thanks. So a few common pitfalls that we see that I just wanted to touch on to make sure that hopefully all of you can avoid that is underestimating some costs. So especially your soft costs, the cost for your plans, maybe the demo, the land clearing, any of those things, just really make sure that you're on the same page with your contractor or, whoever is part of your team to make sure that you're not underestimating those things. We want to fund the construction budget. So you'll have a contingency as part of that, but hopefully each line item is also built out properly so that you have plenty of funds to draw on and you're not having to dip into, personal credit or anything like that. Making sure that you understand the draw schedule for your lender. So for us, you're going to be building first and then drawing on those construction funds, similar to fix and flip. So just making sure that you understand what those timelines look like for each different lender. And then another common pitfall is just choosing the wrong lender. So, we're not the only one out there, but understanding the terms of your loan and making sure that they work for your project is really important. And, if it's a new product for a lender, maybe just making sure that they know what they're doing. Like I said, we've had this product for a few years now. We've worked out a lot of the kinks already. We're always growing, but we have a really solid handle on what this product looks like and how to help. We've shaped it in a way that we're reviewing the budget ourselves, and then we're also having it reviewed externally so that there's no shortfalls in that budget and making sure that you have everything that you need to be successful there. So I just wanted to end today with a few action steps that you can take following this presentation and really get started on finding your next ground up construction project. So first, work on building your team. If you don't already have a team for your flips, if this is your first ever deal, making sure that you have a general contractor, an architect, different lending options, a realtor, anybody that you want as part of your team. Maybe it's a separate team from your flip team, or maybe it's the same team, but just making sure that they have the bandwidth to be able to take on these projects with you and understand the timelines that you're aiming for. Preparing your loan package is going to be really important too. So making sure that you have all of the specific documentation related to you personally and your entity and your financial information. And then as each project comes up, making sure that you have the specific information for that property that you're wanting to build on. Making sure that you do your homework on the data in that market. So, validating not only your after construction value, but also your as is value. So you're not overbuying and just making sure that the margins are where you expect them to be. And lastly, I would like everybody to write down one fear that is holding you back from starting a ground up construction project and one strength that you already possess that will help you succeed. So maybe it's that you think that you're going to mess it up, but the strength that you already have is that you're really good at finding solutions to problems. Maybe you already had a flip house where everything went wrong and you found a solution for all of those things. It took a little bit longer than you had planned, but you figured it out. And you're going to do the same thing with ground up construction. And then a step beyond that is writing down one person that you could connect with that will make that success even greater. So you have the capability of figuring out those problems on your own, but who could you call that could help you figure it out even faster? So, any questions, anything that I can support with?
Any questions from our attendees? I found this information super helpful
I'm
and
so glad. Thanks,
I
Connie.
definitely am less scared.
Good.
And
It's
I
not that bad.
personally, yeah. And I personally will be, putting down my action plans and changing my
Good.
mindset around ground up construction. I love that there is still possibilities. Oftentimes, especially
Hmm.
for newer investors like myself, right? You think that
Yep.
you don't have the experience, so you don't even bother thinking about it. It's not on my immediate roadmap, but
Right.
with information, I'm like, oh, it is possible. So that
Of
definitely
course.
opens up a new avenue for me.
Right. Right.
And I think you're spot on as far as the demand for new
Hmm.
construction, right? So
Yes.
yeah, with that, and if there are no questions from the audience, thank you all so much for
Thank
attending.
you.
And Christine, thank you so much for your time and the information. This
Thanks.
was really, really helpful. We will be posting this on our YouTube channel as well as
Awesome.
other options. So, those who are attending, you can review this at any time. And yeah, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful day. Really
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you coming.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.